You know, my friends, if you are someone who has lived 50 years or more, probably you now do something you did not do when you were younger. And I'm not talking about going to bed at 8 o'clock at night. I'm talking about something I am doing more often as I age. Something simple and yet difficult at the very same time. And I'm guessing that when the years start adding up, many people do the same thing. We start reflecting on our lives, looking back on what has been, thinking about the road that we have traveled, the things we have achieved, the people we have loved. And two statements seem to be said quite often as men and women look back and assess their lives. One, I have no regrets. Two, I would not change a thing. And sometimes we might make such statements because we're filled with an overabundance of pride, unwilling to admit anything about ourselves that might be unflattering or embarrassing. And sometimes we make such statements because we actually believe, falsely, that we can do no wrong. But I think people most often make such statements just because it's too difficult for them to face the truth. You know, it can be painful to bring to light things that we would prefer to remain hidden. It's painful to take an honest look at things we're not proud of. Painful to admit that we have not always done the right thing or made the right choices. And yet, my friends, it is so critically important for us to do this. If we want to be the beloved child of God that each of us was created to be more today than we were yesterday, and to be more tomorrow than we are today. And it's also essential to do this if we ever hope and want to make a difference in this world in which we live. Today's scripture readings reveal the power of choices. In the first reading today from the book of Genesis, we're reminded that our choices matter, that our choices have real and lasting consequences, and that whatever is not right or not good in our world is because we have contributed to making it so. Because each of us has played a role in making the world less than God created it to be. You know, we might like to believe that it is all the fault of Adam and Eve, but that was just the beginning, my friends. We have all continued their pattern, their lead, their sinfulness ever since, except for Jesus Christ. One like us, as you will hear me say quite often, one like us in all things but sin. And today's gospel reveals Jesus there in the desert, being tempted by the devil. We see Jesus refusing to give in to those temptations, refusing to be seduced by things that appeal to ego, to ambition, or to self-interest. Rather, Jesus simply does the right thing. He does the good thing, the selfless thing, the holy thing. External forces do not drive his decisions, his choices. Rather, he simply is true to himself, who he is at the very core, who he is in the very... Because our loving God dwells within each one of us. Then the real you and the real me have the potential to be more than we could ever possibly imagine. More kind, more generous, more compassionate, more loving. My friends, this is what is absolutely possible because God has made each of us for his purpose. And God will give us whatever we need to help make this a reality. This can never happen if we're the kind of person who is convinced that we can say, I have no regrets, and I wouldn't change a thing. Nor can it ever happen if we're afraid to look honestly at our choices, our attitudes, afraid to admit that we have thus far fallen short of what God is asking of us. But it can happen if we honestly believe that we need to change, that we can change, and that God will help us to change. You know, my friends, there are so many things in this world that are broken, wounded, less than what they can be and should be. And it is much too easy to conclude that the world is not the beautiful place God created it to be because of the actions of others. It is much too easy to say, it's not my fault. In one sense, that may be true. Each of us is not responsible for everything and everyone in need of healing in this world. That is obvious. But that does not mean we can simply presume that we have not contributed to the problems, to the injustices, to the suffering. Lent reminds us that each of us has failed to live as God invites us to live. Each of us has made bad choices, gone down roads that sometimes lead to nowhere and nothing good. And our faults, our failings, and sin have not only disappointed God, but they have hurt us personally and have also hurt this world in small ways and in large, in obvious ways and in ways still hidden from us. And that is not on Adam, and that is not on Eve. That is not even on the devil. That is on you and me, my friends. We are the ones who made the choices. So this Lent, let each of us not fear to acknowledge our contribution to the world not being all that it should be. Regrets? You bet. Things we should have done differently? Absolutely. That is just the truth. And so what are we going to do about it, my friends? And what are we going to let God do about it? You see, God cannot do it alone, and neither can we. It takes both, my friends. It takes both.